Welcome back to Seidokan Saturday. My name is Eddie Schumacher. I'm a 7th degree black belt in Okinawan, Seidokan Karate. So last week, the introductory video was on economy of motion. If that didn't bore you too much, we'll move on today to the concept of Koshi. Okay? As one of the core principles and uniquely defining features of Okinawan Karate. In American culture, in the fitness culture today, I have my master's degree in sports conditioning and human performances certifications through the National Strength Conditioning Association, National Association of Sports Medicine, a variety of other certifications. And in that culture, there's a lot of focus on core work. And most people, when they think of core, think of the abs. In Okinawa, Koshi refers to the waist, but it also refers to the hips and the hip girdle and everything that's attached to it. Core is not just your abs. Everything, power, breathing, everything comes from this core central area, which is my obliques, my back muscles, even my glutes, my hip flexors. So all of this is part of core. The two essential movements that identify Okinawan Karate and that are integral to all blocking, punching, and kicking are the rotation of the hips, so the shoulders don't move much, but the hips do, okay? Just being silly here. The other movement of the hips is pelvic tilt. So you have the posterior pelvic tilt where I actually pull my abs in and tilt forward. This comes into kicking techniques. And I have the rotation of the hips, which is where my punches and blocks come from. So when you're doing any of your movements in karate, you want to think about generating the power from this Koshi core, center, hip, ab, oblique area. My obliques come into play a lot when we're going into side kicks, okay, or roundhouse kicks, for instance. My obliques come into play a lot when I'm twisting even, to use my hip rotation for punches. The analogy I want you to consider is, think about a bullet. A bullet has a shell full of gunpowder and a tiny little piece of lead at the top. That tiny little piece of lead is my fist or my foot. The gunpowder is all of this. That's where the power should come from. Even in boxing, the hip turns. Now they talk in boxing about the punch comes from, here where you can see, the punch comes from the heel because we want the heel to come up. But what is that heel doing? It's connecting through the center of my body to deliver the power in the punch. And they say that to ensure that you get that proper rotation. Every style has their version of how they're going to generate that hip power, but it's something to really be conscious and aware of. This hip-centered movement also affects how we step. In regular walking, we push off, we fall forward, we catch ourselves on the next foot, and so forth. So we're continually propelling ourselves off balance. In karate movement, we want to move as a unit, and it's the core that ties my lower and upper body together. And just to stay within the camera scope, I'll keep it small, but I want to make sure that my body stays upright, which means I have to pull from my adductors and from my abs and from my glutes, squeeze forward and push forward instead of pushing off the back foot to fall forward. So, for example, when we get into kata, there shouldn't be any of this rocking or swaying movement. And I found over the years teaching students that that's one of the hardest things in karate movement is to not have the body out of sequence. In agility training in athletics, as I worked as an assistant strength coach at a couple of different universities, we'd find that football players, for instance, couldn't make a cut quickly if their body went off balance. But they had to shorten it, keep their core centered to drive off for their change of directions as they made those movements. If I allow my momentum to take my body out of balance because any part of my core is not tight, then I lose mobility, I lose agility, I lose speed. And in karate, we lose power. So as you practice kata, as you practice your self-defense techniques, your kihon, your basics, any footwork movement, as we learn stances, which I'll address in the next week, consider, is your core engaged? That affects how well you can balance standing on one leg. That affects how well you can stand in your stances. It affects whether you can move efficiently and effectively without any rise and fall, dip, tilt, sway. All of those concepts are connected to core, and most especially the generation of power in your blocks and punches. So as you practice, be really cognizant of what your Koshi, your hip, waist / core, is doing in the movements. It'll improve the quality of your movements, your overall agility, and significantly impact the amount of power you're able to deliver. Good luck. Continue training.